Welcome to Run, Thrive, Survive with me, your host, Sierra Carter, the #1 podcast for your healthy habits for nutrition and exercise, race reviews from special guests, and everyday motivation. And of course, you guys, surviving life together. Are you guys ready? Let's go. Hey guys, I hope you're having a beautiful day. Real quick before we get started, I want to point out that the name of the podcast has changed. So it's no longer the Runpreneur Podcast. It is Run, Thrive, Survive, because we talk a lot about running. We're going to grow together, thrive in life, and of course, we're going to survive the bad days and the good days all together here on the podcast. So I'm super happy to be back in the studio because right now it's a beautiful day outside, and I'm always in a good mood on a beautiful day. But that also means another awesome podcast. So really quick before we get into today's topic about a race review in a absolutely most mind-blowing, gorgeous place, I want to refer back to my video last week. I've got a new video up on YouTube about the 3 essentials that you need if you're just getting into running, getting into fitness, or whatever it is, if you're getting into movement or just life. If you're a living, breathing person, you will want these essentials because they're literally travel-friendly, really easy to use, very cost-efficient, and just making your life easier. So check out that video from last week. I also have the podcast thrown up from the audio with it on all my podcast channels. And if you like those, make sure that you are still liked and subscribed to this channel along with my YouTube channel and heading over to my Instagram to make sure you don't miss the content and fun videos that I make on TikTok for you guys to laugh and enjoy your day and be healthy. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into today's race review topic. And today's race review, I've got a wonderful guest coming on after the break, but we're going to be talking about the Grand Teton Half Marathon and 5K. So if you've never been over to Wyoming, I want you to just sit and picture it for a moment. When I say Wyoming, what do you think of? What kind of scenery do you think of? If you were anything like me before you visited Wyoming, or especially Jackson Hole, which we'll be talking about today, you would probably have thought, I've heard a few say, rolling hills, some buffalo. I thought dirt and tumbleweeds kind of crossing the street. Well, a lot of those might be accurate for a lot of Wyoming. I haven't been to a whole part of Wyoming. I have driven through it. It's pretty accurate for most of it. But here in Jackson Hole, which is up closer, a little bit northwest of Wyoming, it's a little place called Jackson Hole. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, and has gorgeous mountains called the Teton Mountains. Of course, that's not all the mountains around it. There's a lot of mountains around it, but it's famous for the Grand Tetons, and that's where this race is taking place. So this Grand Teton race actually takes place in June. So this year, it's June 4th and 5th. So the 5K is going to happen on the 4th at 7 p.m., and the half marathon is going to happen on the 5th, which is a Sunday, and it starts at 6:30 a.m. Now, the awesome thing about the Grand Teton Half Marathons, it's put on by Vacation Races. If you have not heard about Vacation Races, I would go check them out at vacationraces.com because they have a wide variety of races for you to choose from, all the way from the Yosemite up to Mount Rushmore, down to Teton, the Grand Tetons, over to the Smoky Mountains. All these national parks that you've always dreamed of going to, they've got races at them, so you can plan a trip and head over there with a lot of awesome people who are also running these and doing the same as you are. So that's who's putting it on. And they're doing it in June. Now, I want you to keep in mind, I went to Jackson Hole a few years ago in June. Gorgeous for a couple days, and then all of a sudden it started snowing, and then it was gorgeous again. So if you're going out there, just be aware that the weather can be a hit or miss. On their website, they say that this race can range anywhere from 35 degrees to 67 degrees. I would even go as far as to say it could be up in the 70s because out west, it warms up really quick, but it also cools down just as fast. Just keeping that in mind as you take in the details to planning your race for the Grand Tetons. Now, another thing about this race is it is a point-to-point race. So I'm pulling up the map right here, and you can see it's going to start in one section, and you kind of wrap around, and you go all the way down across the Snake River, which is a pretty famous river. A lot of people go whitewater rafting. You'll hear the guest talk about that today. She's got a lot of fun tips about this. And you go all the way, running all the way up there to the very end. So they will be busing you back to the start line, or probably to certain hotels that have the bus system running with them. Now, the elevation at this race, well, you're going to go up a few hills. So you'll gain about 583 feet because the max elevation is about 6,383 feet elevation. And it starts at about 6,100 feet elevation. So just keeping that in mind, you are going uphill on this race. Now, of course, you'll hear the guest talking about it later on, where it's not rocky. It's gravel, it's on asphalt, it's a pretty awesome trail. So you don't have to worry too much about if your footing's gonna slip, if you're gonna roll your ankle while you're trying to get up and down these hills. Now, a few other things to kind of keep in mind just before we hear all about the race is getting there. So if you're like me, I live in Florida. So obviously I'm not gonna drive across the US to get to Jackson Hole right now. But what you can do is there's a couple of different places to fly into. Jackson Hole does have an airport. Now, the Jackson Hole Airport, if you're familiar with this, with flying and different kinds of airports, it's not a very big airport, so it's a little bit more expensive to fly in. I live next to one. It's probably double or triple the price when I try to fly into a smaller airport like that. Some places you have easier flights, but if you stay there, you're 15 minutes from where the race starts. If you are like me and you're like, I love Southwest, I have to fly wherever the heck Southwest goes because I get 2 free bags. Well, you'll probably have to fly into either Denver or Salt Lake City. Now, Denver, I've driven up from Denver to Jackson Hole. It was a long drive, I'm going to warn you, and it was about 8 hours. And Jessica will be talking today. She drove up from Salt Lake City to Jackson Hole, which was about 5. So you have your pick there, where it's kind of harder to get just as close to fly in there. Now, of course, if you're taking other airlines, you can also fly into Idaho Falls, which Southwesters, I don't think Southwest actually flies into Idaho Falls, sadly. I've checked that before, and there's nowhere near there, so you'd probably have to fly into Salt Lake or Denver. But Idaho Falls is only 2 hours away. And, of course, there's a bunch of places to stay there. There's Teton Village, Jackson Hole, and I can tell you right now there's a lot of Airbnbs and lodges out of all over there. And just being there, it's a pretty condensed but spread out area where if you stay in the Teton Village, Jackson Hole, or anywhere in between there, you will be within race distance. So it's not going to be a far drive as long as you're in that general vicinity trying to, enjoy your time. Now, what's cool about vacation races is that they have, and I've actually never seen this before except on this race when I was looking at it, but now I'm starting to notice it. They have other challenges that you can do while you're out there. So if you're traveling alone, which I've done several times for a race, this is why vacation races stands out, is you can actually join like hiking groups, and they have hiking challenges. So focusing specifically on the Grand Teton trifecta, that Grand Teton trifecta, try saying that 10 times fast, is hiking Snake River Overlook, Rendezvous Point, and also heading over to Jenny Lake. Now, usually it's hiking Cascade Canyon, but because that could be blocked by snow, they just have you go take a picture at Jenny Lake. And if you do this within 72 hours of running the marathon before or the half marathon before or after, you actually get a small little pin to as a token of how great you are for hiking and running this half marathon. So that's just a really good lead up starting point for basic information that I want you to know going into today's race review, because Jessica's got an amazing story, got some great points, and a lot of really cool things that she did while she was there that I think it would be worthwhile for you to hear if you are planning to run this race this year or next year. So coming up after this break, we are going to be talking to Jessica, getting to know who she is, why she loves running, and hearing her story about the Grand Teton Half Marathon right after our sponsors. Welcome back, you guys, from that break. Thank you so much for sticking around because we've got a amazing second half of this podcast because we're going to be talking to our guest, Jessica, about the Grand Teton Half Marathon and her experience at it. So I am more excited to introduce Jessica. Go ahead and introduce yourself, why you love running, and why did you even do this one in the first place?
Thanks for inviting me to do this. This is really exciting. I really got into running probably about 12 years ago. It was just something that I never really did when I was younger and thought it would be fun to get into. And I really enjoy the challenge of it. And it's nice because it's something that I can kind of do anywhere and everywhere. So I probably about 3 years ago got into the vacation races, and I saw the pictures of the Grand Tetons and immediately went, I have got to go there. This is where I need to go. And so I signed up for the race, and I did the race in 2019. And then unfortunately I was supposed to do it last year, but because of coronavirus, the race itself was canceled.
Right. And I mean, you got in right under the wire with that race because it was technically in the middle of the pandemic last year in June, because it's around the June time frame. And I know that you had mentioned to me you were going to do it with the Glacier Half Marathon, right? Back to back? Or
I was going to do it with Yellowstone back to back.
Yeah, so were you going to do that one of those challenges?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so going from here, so you said you've been running for 12 years. Mm-hmm. How many half marathons have you done? Do you keep count?
I've probably done maybe 18 to 20. Wow. My goal is actually to do one half marathon in all 50 states. Love it. So I've done 10 states so far. Hopefully this year, 11, 12, and 13 will be crossed off. Let's start at the beginning. What states have you done? So I've done California, Arizona, Utah, South Dakota, Wyoming, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, and one more that I'm not going to be able to think of at the moment. And then this year, the hope is to be able to do Colorado at the Rockies. Yes. I'm going to go up and do Yellowstone, which will be Montana, and Washington out Mount Rainier. Yep. And I can't wait for that Washington one. Just like thinking about that one. That one, Washington, everybody raves about it, and that one's just going to be absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. Now, focusing on the Grand Teton. So, when you signed up for this, because understanding you and I both live in Florida, and just thinking about it right now, we hear the major red flag in our minds. How are we going to train for elevation? So, starting from like kind of beginning to end, how did you start prepping when you signed up for the Grand Teton Marathon or half marathon before even getting over there and living the experience? So I really try to do a combination of things between running outside, running inside. If I'm running inside on a treadmill, I always try to set my treadmill to a little bit of an incline to, kind of simulate the effort of running outside. And then I have an exercise bike in my house that I use too. So just different cross training, unfortunately, really in Florida, you really can't train for the elevation, and you can't train for any of the hills either because it's, it's flat here too. We have a dip in the road, from water or something. Right. I got to go over to the beach and run over the bridges. Yeah. But so unfortunately, there's really no way to really train for the altitude. Now, thankfully, I've never really had an issue with it. Right. But it's definitely different, especially running the hills. To me, that's the challenging part. Now, getting to the race, where did you fly into? So I flew from Tampa to Salt Lake City and then drove up into Wyoming. How long of a drive was that?
Do you
About
remember?
5 hours.
Okay, it's not too bad.
Mm-mm.
When you got there, where did you stay? Did you camp?
No, I stayed in Jackson Hole, actually right outside of Jackson Hole. Um, it's when I went in 2019 and actually did the race, and then in 2020 I went with some family, and we stayed at it's called the Elk Refuge Inn, which is kind of on the outside of Jackson Hole going towards the park. So you're
Okay.
not right in the middle of the city, but you're close enough to where all the restaurants are. And in the winter, they have all the elk come down out of the mountains. So there's all kinds of snow and stuff like that. Obviously, it's not there in June when the race is, but it's,
Right.
it's just nice kind of being out out of the city.
Right. Was that in Teton Village?
No,
No. Okay, so
no.
you're kind of
Teton
between the
Village
two?
is kind of north of that.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Okay. So when you got there, how excited were you? And what did you think about it once you got there? Were you thinking that was going to be a good race? What did you do? Just walk us through this. Relive it and walk us through this.
So yeah, I mean, I drove in and because I flew into Salt Lake City and stayed there overnight and then drove up the next day so that I wasn't driving through the mountains in the dark.
Right.
And I remember checking into my hotel and coming out of my hotel and driving basically up around the corner, and you kind of come around the corner and all of a sudden, bam, there are the mountains. And it is just one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. So I spent the first couple days I was there just kind of exploring the park a little bit and the area. And then I actually did the 5K and the half marathon, their challenge that they do. So I did the 5K Friday night, which
Right.
was fun because it's, just around the little town there. And then Saturday morning was the half marathon. And it was, it was a chilly morning, especially compared to living in Florida. But
In June, which is weird for us.
yeah, right. And there was actually still a little bit of snow on the ground. So it was
Wow.
definitely not what I expected.
Right.
But it was kind of an overcast morning that morning, actually. And then I think for me, because I'm not really a terribly fast runner, so I usually start towards the back. But
Hey.
it was probably about mile 8 that the sun came out, and I again came like kind of around the corner, and there were the mountains. And you run over the Snake River a couple times, which is beautiful. And then the finish line, it finishes on a golf course up there, and the mountains are in the background, and it is hands down just the most beautiful finish line I've ever seen.
So we have a few pictures of these while we're on
Mm-hmm.
this. So I want to pull up those pictures. So let's start with the ones. Is this the finish line?
No, this is actually at like the race expo beforehand.
Oh, that's even more beautiful. So
Mm-hmm.
those, I'm guessing, just looking at this photo off to the very right, are those the Tetons in the photo?
Yeah.
So those are the Tetons. Those are the mountains
Mm-hmm.
leading up to the Tetons. That's gorgeous. And
Mm-hmm.
it does look a little bit chilly over there.
Yeah.
But it's June. Do you have, let's see, go to the another picture. Do we have another one? Switching. All right, where was this picture?
So this is the finish line.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that was the line to get the bus back to where the parking was. But yeah, this was the
Wow.
finish line on the golf course with the mountains in the background.
So, where was this golf course? Where was that finish line? Was it around Jackson Hole or was it outside of there?
Yeah, it was right around Jackson Hole.
Okay, so you
Mhm.
still had, and you can just see in the picture if you're listening to this on the podcast, the mountains are snow capped, and it is June. Now, it is famous for snowing up there in June. I've been to Yellowstone in June when it was snowing, and it was the middle of June. So you're at the beginning of June. It's still technically like winter, spring up there. It's
Yeah.
not summer till end of July, August for a couple weeks, and then it goes back to winter. But you can see it's just so green. It's just so pretty. Now, what did you think? What were your thoughts going through the race itself? Because I know that there was a little bit of inclines here and there, and it wasn't until I looked at the elevation map that it was actually pretty hilly. How did you get through
Yeah.
that? What was kind of your mental process to get through this race, especially coming from flat Florida?
Yeah, I really try to focus on using the downhills to my advantage. So, walk uphill if need be, and then run the downhill part of it. None of them were super strenuous hills, but definitely, not trying to gas myself out on the first one either, and trying to, realize that, okay, we've still got, maybe 10 more miles to go. And definitely using the downhills to my advantage.
I think one of the best race tips I've ever heard somebody say is don't tire yourself up on the uphills. Just because, like slow down as much as you can, because you always make up for that time on the downhills if you let your body and the momentum do the work. And I think just that little small tip actually makes a huge difference mentally, because a lot of people do try to push themselves on the uphills. They hunch over, you get out of breath, and then you just completely cut off any breathing and oxygen flow in the body as soon as you hunch over. And it's really hard. Mentally, it's really hard not to hunch over, because that's the first thing you do when you're out of breath going up a hill. You think, I don't want to fall backwards, I need to fall forwards. Now just getting through it. So how was your time? How was your pace? How did you feel like you did it in this race?
I feel like I did okay. I at the time I was finishing in about 3 hours and 15-20 minutes. So it's fairly consistent. I mean, as time has gone on, my times have gotten better, but around that time a couple of years ago, it was usually right around about 3 hours and 15 minutes, which is, comfortable for me. I'm not killing myself.
Absolutely.
So I can, and a part of enjoying races like this, I feel like, is really enjoying the scenery. I'm not just going out to run as fast as I can and be, totally focused on the road. I want to be enjoying everything and looking around.
I mean, this has to be one of those races that we're not bored whatsoever running along those mountains. How was the trail? Was it rocky? Was it, I guess, were you on pavement? What kind of trail was it?
It wasn't really trail. Most of it was either pavement or like a gravel road. So it wasn't really any trail running that I remember.
Was it pretty wide the whole way?
Yeah.
That's nice.
So there was lots of space.
That's really nice. Now, just kind of recapping, what would you, looking back on the race, what would you do differently? Just knowing how it is now, going into it from here, would you fly in somewhere different? Would you stay somewhere different? What would you do differently looking back on the race?
I feel like I would definitely maybe try to train a little bit more for the hills. But otherwise, I mean, flying into Salt Lake City was easy. The drive up is really pretty. Staying where I stayed was great. I mean, maybe staying over in Teton Village would be a different experience. So that could be a lot of fun. Teton Village, I think, is definitely more geared towards younger people.
Okay.
And even going up in the winter, because they do big like snow skiing and snowboarding and stuff like that.
Right.
But even staying, more downtown in downtown Jackson could be a different experience too. There's, the nice thing is it's a very small area, but there's tons to choose from, which is great.
Do you have any favorite restaurants around there?
There is a Mexican restaurant there that I think is called Three Flying Pigs or something.
That's hilarious.
Something like that. Their steak fajitas are hands down the best steak fajitas I've ever had in my life.
Oh, that actually sounds worth it just to go out there for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a ton of food, but it is so good.
Well, if you're running and you're hiking all day, I'm sure that's who they're catering to.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of outdoor activities there. Now, while you were out there, do you have any favorite hikes? What did you do to fill the time out there? Because, if you're out there, you're not gonna be sitting inside your hotel room. You're gonna be out exploring, right?
Yeah, definitely.
What did you do while you were out there?
So the first year that I went, I actually went by myself.
Okay.
So the hikes that I did were more, I didn't do a whole lot of remote like backcountry hiking, just because it is that time of year. The bears are starting to come out of hibernation. They've had their cubs.
Yeah.
And I don't need to come face to face with a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
That just seems like a bad idea. So I really hung around Jenny Lake a lot. They've got a little boat ride you can take around the lake. There's this spot called Schwabacker's Landing where I actually saw a beaver, which was kind of cool. And then there's, on the other side of the road, there's this area called Grovant, which is where the Snake River runs. And I didn't see any animals when I went the first year in 2019, but when I went last year, we actually saw a moose down there.
I was gonna ask if you got to see any moose while
Mm-hmm.
you were there. So you saw moose, but you didn't see any grizzlies or anything. How about buffalo?
Not so the first year that I went, I didn't see hardly any animals. When I
Okay.
went last year, I don't know if it was because of the pandemic and there
Right.
just weren't a lot of people there, but between us being in the Grand Tetons and then up at Yellowstone,
How cool is that?
I think we saw 3 different moose. We probably saw 7 or 8 bears. Yeah,
Wow.
we saw a whole bunch of bears. We had a black bear walk right through the parking lot we were in. We
Oh my
saw a
gosh.
mom grizzly and her cub, which was just the cutest thing.
That's adorable. Were you inside with that one though?
No.
You were outside?
Hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, they're good up in those areas. They kind of know
Okay.
where the bears are,
Okay.
and the rangers are really good about keeping people away from them,
Mhm.
especially the mom with the cub. It was, make sure you give her plenty of space because
Absolutely.
you don't want anything bad to happen.
Oof. They're not. So I went out there 2018, and I didn't go
Mhm.
out for a race, or it was a separate race. But my thing is, I've gone everywhere, and I've always wanted to see a bear. I've never
Yeah.
seen a real bear. I lived in the mountains. Everybody
Mhm.
sees bears. I've never seen a bear in the
Yeah.
wilderness. And so every time I went on a hike, they're like, "There's a bear ahead." Oh, and he runs away. But
Right.
I just remember the week after I was there, somebody got attacked by a grizzly right after I was there. So
Wow.
I've always, I hear those stories where they're with their cubs, and even if you
Mhm.
get like a little, not just too close, they somehow like wrap around the forest and come back behind you, and that's like their
Mhm.
tactic or something. So that scares me, but that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's their stealth mode. But 7 or 8
Yeah.
bears is incredible. Wow.
Mhm. Yeah.
Did you do
Yeah.
any? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Like
don't
I
wanna
said, I
interrupt
mean, I
you.
don't know if it's because of, the pandemic that there just
Right.
wasn't a whole lot of people in the parks. And the nice thing about usually
Right.
when Vacation Races does their events, it's usually kind of right before season starts for these parks. So the parks aren't quite as crowded, which is really nice. But it was definitely
Absolutely.
really exciting getting to see the animals that we saw last year.
Wow. Now, would you recommend anything to anybody? Like, even if you didn't do it, is there something that you'd go back and do for people that are going up to this race, especially this? It's coming up. It's coming up. What,
Mhm.
2 months from now?
Yeah.
Is there something that you'd recommend that they do while they're there? That those must do things.
I mean, I would say definitely take the time to explore the park. It's beautiful. Grand Teton, the nice thing is that
Yeah.
it is generally a little less crowded because it's got, Big Brother Yellowstone is right there.
Right.
But take the time to explore the park. We were actually supposed to go whitewater rafting on the Snake River last year,
Ooh.
and it was too cold. The water was running too fast, and it was too cold. And they didn't. The problem actually was that they didn't have enough people, so they weren't going to send out just one boat with my little group of 5 people in it.
Right. You
So,
probably
but
go
I
too
would,
fast.
yeah. So, I mean, I would definitely recommend doing that. I mean, there's all kinds of different things to do between, like I said, I mean, the whitewater rafting to fly fishing
Wow.
to just hiking around the mountains, different restaurants. We did a covered wagon dinner while we were up there last year, which was kind of interesting. You get in a covered wagon and they kind of take you up into the mountains, and then you get like an old time like cowboy dinner, and they put on a little show.
Who was that through? Do you remember?
I think they were called Bar T covered wagon dinners.
That
And
is
if you
so
just
cool.
if you just search covered wagon dinners up in that area,
Yeah.
there was like 3 or 4 to choose from.
I've never heard of
Uh,
that.
Yeah, it was a lot of
That's so
fun.
neat.
It was, definitely country kind of hillbilly thing to do, but the food was
Absolutely.
good
That's so
and the
much fun.
atmosphere was a lot of fun.
How would you, for the running, the race part, I guess, thinking about it, how would you describe to people how to dress, or what should they be ready for, and how did you dress for this race, and how should they like kind of prepare mentally to dress
Mhm.
for?
I would say plan to wear layers.
Okay.
So, one thing that Vacation Races does is usually around mile 3, they do a loose clothing drop.
Mhm.
So I always take,
I love
if
that.
it's somewhere that it's going to be a little bit colder, I always take a jacket that I'm not super concerned about if I don't get it back. But what they'll do is there's like a bin there that you can toss whatever you want to in there. And then once the last person passes that stop, then they bring everything to the finish line and kind of lay everything out so you can find your stuff. I mean, for those of us that come from Florida, I think you and I talked about this the other day, that I run outside in 90-degree weather and, capris and a tank top,
Yes.
whereas other people would be in like shorts and no shirt because it's just so hot to them. So going somewhere where it's, maybe 40 or 50 degrees at the start, that's just freezing to us. So, I was running in long pants and a long sleeve shirt, and I had my, little headband that like covered my ears.
We've got our gloves on, our wool socks. I mean, we're ready to go. We're ready to climb one of those snow-capped mountains when we're racing.
Exactly.
Exactly how we are.
So yeah, I would definitely say just wear layers, wear things that you can take off because obviously once you get moving, then things warm up too.
Oh, absolutely. Especially like, I mean, I think I love vacation races for that reason because they have a bag drop. And I know along the way too, I think one thing I want to note, they're litter free. So worrying about the national parks, they make sure you bring your own water, or they have refill stations where they don't have all this waste dropping around everywhere they are. So I think those are two highlights about vacation races that a lot of people should make sure that they know going into the race. One, you need to bring your water, and two, you can dress as hot as you want and you can take it off, but may or may not come back to you. I get it. But I think it's it's a good idea that it is there. Now, comparing this race, what race would you compare this to difficulty level wise with another vacation race, just so people get an idea of what they're going into if they've run other vacation races but maybe haven't run this one? Would you say it's difficult? Would you compare it to another race? Is it comparable? How do you go about that one?
I would say it was probably more on the easy to moderate side of things. Even though there are the hills, it wasn't super strenuous. I mean, comparing it to other vacation races that I've done, the race at Mount Rushmore, that was extremely strenuous. That one is uphill a lot of the way. Now, the opposite of that is the race at Yosemite. I did Yosemite a couple of years ago, and that one, the majority of it is actually downhill. So that's an easier race.
Okay.
I'm going to say easier. It depends how you train too, because sometimes going downhill can actually be harder, like on your knees and stuff like that if you're not used to it. But
a lot of people lose toenails too.
Yeah. But I feel like, the Grand Teton race was probably one of the more easy to moderate difficulty levels. Definitely something if someone's looking for like a first half marathon to do, it's doable.
Okay.
And even if you're experienced and you've done a bunch of them, it's still going to present you with a little bit of a challenge, but you can kind of take the time to enjoy the scenery around you too.
And just to highlight one thing, coming from Florida, and I know you kind of mentioned it, you didn't have any issues with the elevation, or did you feel it?
I don't think I had any issues with the elevation. Again, I'm not a really fast runner, so maybe I just don't notice it. I'm a little more comfortable slowing down a little bit. Now, when I go to Colorado in July, that could be a little different elevation-wise. But I didn't notice it so much being in Wyoming.
Okay. Well, I mean, so I think the elevation starts at like about 6,300 feet. It doesn't get too high above that. So I can see it being like, if you're coming from Florida and we're not having issues with it, I think anybody coming from anywhere else in the country should be fine. Because we're the lowest, unless you go to New Orleans and that's below sea level. Now, one more question tying into kind of like how you prepped and prepared for this. What kind of shoes did you wear? Like, because a lot of people, you'll see them asking, can they wear, regular shoes? Should they wear different kinds of shoes? Are you going to roll your ankle? What would you recommend?
I just wore my regular running shoes. I run in Brooks Ghost, and I didn't have any issues with any kind of like terrain issues, because you go from being on pavement to being on like a gravel road.
Okay.
So I didn't have any issues with just my regular like road running shoes.
Good to know. So you don't need anything super special for that. Awesome. Well, we've just got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to kind of go into our speed round, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah.
So the speed round is just, no pressure on you. Just bring in your favorite highlights about running and things you want to share with other people. So we've got 4 questions for you. First one is, well, we already answered this one. What is your favorite running shoe? I'm guessing it's the Ghost.
Yeah.
All right, Ghost. Sorry. Second one. what is your absolute essential running accessory? Anywhere you go, anywhere you travel, whether it's Tetons, Yosemite, what do you need to have with you when you run?
My headphones.
What kind of headphones
listen
do you
to
have?
music. The AirPods, Apple AirPods.
They're nice.
Mm-hmm.
I would always recommend to people Bluetooth. Don't run with cords. I smack my phone all over the place.
Yeah. Or I get my arms swinging and I pull them out of my ears, and it's just, the cordless ones are just so much easier.
I feel like you're pulling your ears down. Yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah.
Now, the favorite question for you, what is your next race you're planning?
Well, my next race, I'm not traveling for it. We do the Gasparilla weekend here in Tampa, which actually normally is in February.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Obviously, with coronavirus, obviously things have gotten changed a little bit. They made this event totally virtual. The plan was to be able to hopefully do it in person. Oh. They rescheduled it from February to May to hopefully do it in person in May. Well, it's still going to be virtual, but over here in Tampa, we have an area called Bayshore Boulevard, which is the longest continuous sidewalk in the country. And it runs right by Tampa Bay. So what they're going to do is actually close down the road Saturday and Sunday morning. So even though it's, virtual, everybody can still go out and run where they normally would.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and then the next one after that will be Yellowstone in June.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I hope May's not too hot in Tampa, but it's still going to be a really nice time to get out and enjoy it with other runners. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then finally, our last question. So the slogan for my podcast, Runpreneur, is Run Your Life. And I want to ask you, how have you been able to apply running to every aspect of your life? Lessons you've learned on the courses, lessons you learned in training and on the trails. What do you use from running to apply to your life, to run your life?
Yeah, I mean, as, cliche as it sounds, it's just that you just got to keep going. Yeah. You get, just like getting out onto a race course, the last thing that I want is did not finish. So I just want to make sure that, however I have to do it, I get to the finish line. And it's the same thing with real life stuff too, that, whether it's something with work or family or friends, just kind of keep trudging along and putting in the work and you'll get there.
Yeah. I just one foot after another, right? That's all it really is. That's all you can do. That's how you get anywhere in life. So, well, that's pretty much all I have for all our listeners today. Jessica, if they want to follow you, can they follow you on your running travels and everything?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'm on Instagram. It is Jess Kelso, JessKelso. So that's got all my travel pictures and stuff like that. I always try to put pictures of the races that I do because they're just so beautiful.
And I can't wait to see the one for what you're doing, Yosemite?
Yellowstone, Rocky
Mountains,
and then Mount Rainier.
Oh, I can't wait to see those photos as well. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for coming on the show today. Yeah. I wish you the best of luck on your next races, your next endeavors, and in Gasparilla. So,
yeah, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. And if anybody else wants to hear any more podcasts, head over to my YouTube channel or to anywhere you listen to podcasts at The Runpreneur, and you'll find them all there. And you can also head over to my Instagram, where I'm pretty interactive, bringing on the content there and giving you sneak peeks about what is coming up. So you guys, thank you so much for listening today. I hope to see you here again soon, than later. So you guys get out there and run your lives. Bye, guys.